All sports, all plays. Yeah. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're eye in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics never the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays. They work in your faces. Grace at the field, so tie the laces. All sports, all plays. Network. All sports, all plays. Network. We on top of our game. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays.
And good evening, everyone. Rich Daniels here, along with my partner, Joe Traub. This is A Hardball Life here on the All Sports, All Plays Network. And we got some serious stuff to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking playoffs, who's going to be there, who isn't. We are talking the best managers out there, and we're talking one of the biggest problems facing baseball today, according to everybody out there, except me, probably. But we'll be going to that in a second. Joe, how are you doing today, man?
Doing great. You know, it's first day of spring. We got baseball on. Spring training's been going great. You got opening day in about a week and a half. What could be better? I'm just really enjoying having baseball this late in March after we all know it was ripped away from us as well as much of normal life was a year ago at this time. So nice to restore some of that normalcy and just really looking forward to baseball firing off for real soon.
Yeah, it's going to be a real celebration for, those of us in the hardball life, that we live over and over again. So I'm loving it. And also, before anybody says anything, yes, you're seeing correctly. This is an Ohio State hat after they lost to a number 15 seed. Okay, so either you're a fan or you're not. So if you can be a fan, you be a fan times like this, you're a fan. You're a true fan. They don't have to be successful for me to love them. So, granted, it's in my DNA to really root for them, but that's okay. I support the Buckeyes all the way, and even though they had a rough time with, they lost to one guy, Earl Roberts. How could you lose 5-on-1? I don't get it. But anyway, moving on here, we're going to get started. And Joe, this is a subject that you wanted to cover, and I think it's a great one. It's one of the bigger problems facing baseball today, according to a lot of folks, and that is the pace of play. They're talking about game length. They're talking about all kinds of problems that are going on out there. And this is something that we've seen baseball experimenting with, trying to do things with, as you and I both work in the minor leagues. We've seen this over and over again. So, I'll throw it to you. You get us started, and then we'll have a discussion on this one.
Well, boy, what a great topic this is. You just brought up the NCAA tournament in Ohio State. Let me just say, I've been watching March Madness all weekend. And I have to say, I think the sport that really has issues with pace of play is basketball, not baseball. I mean, look at it, for crying out loud. You got reviews on if balls went out of bounds with 30 seconds left in the 13-point game, and they're trying to figure out who has possession. It's like, really? Is it that big of a deal? And then also looking at common fouls and stuff like that and late in the game when really the outcome's already decided. So I think baseball has had a few issues here and there, but basketball is really where it's at. We can leave that topic for another podcast that discusses basketball. But for baseball, I think pace of play is something that's kind of overstated because fact of the matter is that's just how the game is played nowadays. It's not going to be back like in the 30s and 40s when it was common to have an hour and a half, 2-hour game, a 2-0 game. The game has changed so much to the fact that it is so much based on strategy. And with that comes, things that are going to interrupt an inning, such as pitching changes, pinch hitters. And the most common thing that I think drives up the time of especially a Major League Baseball game is simply long at bats. You look at the one that Luis Guillorme had at spring training last week at 22 pitches. That's not really something that you can't control unless you want the guy to bunt foul or pop it up or just give up an at bat. I think a lot of times guys are seeing more and more pitches during a plate appearance, and after a foul ball, it's only more natural that guys are going to step out. The pitcher's going to reset, he asks for a base. There's going to be 45 seconds between the pitch, and I think kind of if you don't like that, why are you really paying attention to baseball? Because it's not as no matter what the purists say or the outsiders say. I really don't think baseball is a slow game. Now a game might drag on if it's 18-8 through 7 innings and there have been 15 combined walks, but that's just kind of what you deal with. There's still always entertaining things that are going on. And really, I know you and I have talked about this a lot. The beauty of baseball is there's no clock. So even if there is a 10-run game after 7 innings, anything can happen because you got to get that 27th out more times than not, in a typical 9-inning game to secure a victory. So yeah, pace of play, I think a lot of that talk can be thrown out the window. I do think that some of the things they're trying, the pitch clock, I do think that has its benefits. It more just tells pitchers, especially in the minor leagues, like, okay, we got to speed this up. We got to keep going. No dawdling, no dilly-daddling on the mound. There's a time where the game has to be played. So it serves as a good reminder, but I don't think it's a big antagonizing issue that you have to shove down anyone's throat at this time in the game of baseball.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this with the hurry-up tactics that they put out there, the pitch clock. We've seen in the Pacific Coast League, where you and I both work, and you've worked in other leagues. We've seen a 20-second pitch clock.
Yeah.
And that has had, I'll say, yes, they wanted the games to be shorter. They wanted to increase play. Yeah. The games went from 3 hours and 4 minutes to 2 hours and 54 minutes. Now, is that a real improvement? Is that a decision maker for people? Oh, it's under 3 hours now, I'll go see it. No, it's not. The problem with the pace of play and all that stuff is not the length of a game. Okay, people do 3-hour things all the time. They talk about young people who are using long people. Young people go to concerts that last 3 hours. They go to movies that last 3 hours. Okay,
or longer.
They'll sit through stuff like that all the time. What the problem is with baseball is not the pace of play, it's the intervals between action. Okay, and most people, and you're talking about casual fans for the most part, most people see when the ball is hit as action. Okay, so the thing is, you can't change the game that much to make it that much more interesting for people. All right, and trying to change the rules. There's been talks of of 2-pitch strikeouts and stuff like that. Really crazy stuff that changed, that stuff that's been going on in baseball for 100 years and over 100 years. And it's crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. Now, what's changed around the game of baseball is how the game is consumed. All right. There's a bunch of teams now that don't even have radio broadcasts. They only have online stuff. There's a bunch of teams out there that are adapting to the technology of today and the way people use it. All right. What baseball needs is not to change the rules to accommodate, how information is taken in these days. They need to be able to embrace how information is taken these days and come up with an app that people can sit there and actually just be on their phone or whatever while the game's going on. And, the app can give them lineups, it can give them stats, it can give them tips on everything, it can keep track of everything for them. It basically keeps score for them and give them trivia and contests, and you can order food from your seat, that kind of stuff. That's what it needs. And then while they're in the middle of that, somebody up in the press box presses a button that goes next pitch on the screen, and everybody can look there, get their head up and watch what's going on. And if nothing happens, they go right back to what they're doing. Okay, that's how information is taken in these days. Football and basketball, hockey, those kind of sports don't have a problem with it because they have a regular cadence of action. Baseball is different. So baseball has to be able to adapt to how things are consumed these days, information-wise, rather than trying to change their game and to adapt to to those kind of things.
Yeah, I think you said it well, because the average fan that goes to a game, they're not going to care whether the game's 2 hours and 54 minutes or 3 hours and 4 minutes, like you said. They're going to be walking around. They're going to be getting a hot dog. They're going to want to go get a beer 2 innings later. They're going to want to walk around, and especially in a minor league park, see some of the amenities like the playground or the jumpers. It's just what they do, especially if they have kids. The chances are they're going to be sitting in their seats for 3 hours watching the game is very unlikely. There's other stuff to do at a baseball game, and that's really the beauty of it. Maybe you get bored for a couple innings. It's a 3-0 game early, and then you're walking back to your seat, and the home team hits a 3-run home run in the 5th inning to tie the game at 3, and then you're settled in for an exciting few innings, and no one's even really caring about how long the game's going to go. So it's just part of it, and I think most fans have learned to live with it, and hopefully more will as this season comes back, and especially as we get minor league baseball back and people start to appreciate it again here come May.
Well, in the major leagues, it's not as much of an issue. I think it's as it is in the minor leagues. We've seen it with the teams that we've worked for, where nobody's really a fan of the team the team that's hosting the game. It's a social event. Mm-hmm. They show up and they're bringing people from work, or they're meeting friends, and they go to see 2 or 3 games a year maybe, and it's just more of an activity than it is a fan-based kind of thing. Especially in the minor leagues. But you get to the major leagues, there's a lot more fans of the actual team that are there, and it's a little different there. But I mean, that's the thing about football. Okay, everybody wants to say football's the ideal thing. Well, there's only 8 home games for most people in football. So a football game is more of an event than it is like a sporting, ongoing sporting thing. So I mean, it's a little different, approach that way. But when you really look at it, baseball, you've got 81 home games in the major leagues. You've got 71 home games in the minor leagues and AAA and AA. So you can go to a different one every night. You can go to a lot of them, especially when you get to a long homestand. They've got 12, 13, 14 games in a row that you can go and they play pretty much every day. So they really have to take a look, not at the game itself. They have to take a look at the way information is consumed these days. And there's so many people, they'll be sitting there watching a game and they'll be on their phone doing something and they'll have music playing in their ears. They'll be doing all 3 things at once. So you have to, I think, really embrace how people are and take that and adapt the game to that, how the game is consumed. Everybody talks about the Nielsen ratings. Oh, baseball's ratings are going down every year. Baseball's doomed. No, that's not. Up until 2020, 2019 back, 17 straight years, Major League Baseball set a revenue record. Mm-hmm. 17 straight years. Okay. And last year, of course, blew everything, but still, the game is as healthy as it's ever been. There's no problem with that. What they're dealing with is just how people see it and how people take it in.
And speaking of the ratings, I actually saw a stat back in October when the postseason was going on. This gave me hope that, baseball's going to be okay. The Dodgers and Braves were playing Game 7 of the NLCS on a Sunday night. And obviously on a Sunday night in October, you're going to have Sunday Night Football on NBC. I think the game was the 49ers and Rams that night. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point is, the baseball game had more viewers than the football game that night, which I thought was a really good sign. And, all the people that were saying they were going to boycott baseball and not watch it, and that it was going to, I think based on that rating that night, I think it was showing that, okay, it's going to be okay. People are still watching.
Well, that too. And the thing is, those ratings, those television ratings don't include streaming options.
Right.
How many people are taking in games on streaming options all the time? How many people? I mean, I don't know about you. I don't watch the local TV station on my phone. Okay. I watch things that I can't get on my TV on my phone. And that's really what a lot of people are doing. I see it all the time in a lot of the social media stuff. They say, okay, such and such isn't carrying this team's games this year. What are the options that are? Where can I find that? There's people always looking for these streaming options. So they really need to measure that and include that. The Nielsen ratings are so far in the past in how many people are watching or something like that. That's just conventional television. We're talking about stuff that's all over the place. Like I said, there's folks that don't. There's some of these teams that are talking about dropping TV contracts altogether and going with just streaming options because the technology is such that they can do that. And it's a lot easier. It's a lot cheaper to do that.
Yeah, everything's changing, as we've seen in the world with COVID and money and financial restrictions. So really, who knows where any of this is headed. But I think the game's going to be all right. And I think a lot of people are going to be watching it here once it starts up in a couple of weeks.
Well, I can tell you right now, nothing that produces over $10 billion a year is in trouble. Okay. If it's in such trouble, why is there so much money in the game? I mean, honestly, it's making as much or more than the NFL. It's making as much or more than the NBA. It's competitive as far as the money goes. So I'm sorry, the death of baseball and the length of games, the pace of play, all that stuff being the problem. I'm not seeing it. There's a lot of these individual teams that are moving towards adapting to the way information is consumed these days, and I think Major League Baseball needs to do the same. That's for sure. All right, my friend. I think we jumped all over that one pretty well.
So, me too.
Remember, everybody, you want to ask us a question, what's going on? You got a comment on the pace of play or the length of games, anything like that? Just chime in our comments section. We'll be happy to have you come out this year or this evening. So that's number one. Now we get to have some fun, because the last couple of shows we've done some ratings about bullpens and starting rotations, things like that. Now, as per your suggestion, we are taking a look at managers, our top 5 managers that we have in Major League Baseball. And we'll see. I usually have a surprise in there for you, but this list I don't think is going to be too surprising.
Want me to start it off with number 5?
Go right ahead. Who's your number 5?
Number 5 might surprise some people, but I went ahead with Rocco Baldelli for the Minnesota Twins. I know he's only been there a couple of years, but he's done a heck of a job. And I know that people are going to say that the Twins always choke in the playoffs, and they have lost in the first round both times under Baldelli's leadership, but we can kind of forget that. They've had 2 really good regular seasons so far. They've won the division both times, 101 win season in 2019, and then 36-24 in the shortened 60-game 2020 campaign. That's pretty good. And to win back-to-back division titles, first time in a long time that had happened for the Twins. And I think he keeps things simple. As a former player, and kind of a recent former player too, he was still active as recently as 10 years ago. He kind of knows the way the game's been changing, the way the guys have kind of been thinking differently along the lines of just position players, pitchers, the way everything's working. And he's come in there and he's done a nice job. He's helped bring in some veteran guys, helped them keep some core guys who have been in Minnesota a while, such as Max Kepler and Mitch Garver. And now you got the young up-and-comers, Luis Arias, and their pitching staff's really good in Minnesota too. So I think Baldelli does a good job. And something neat, I know he had a very unfortunate and almost scary medical condition. There were issues with his limbs that prevented him from playing as long as he would have wanted to. So he got into coaching, and he started out in the Tampa Bay Rays organization, who we played for. And we mentioned how good the Rays are at producing talent that sometimes goes to other teams. And hey, Baldelli started there as a coach, and the Twins took notice, and he's now their manager. So we can kind of give the Tampa Bay Rays credit to that as well. But Baldelli, I think the White Sox, we're going to do our predictions later, so I don't want to spoil it. But the AL Central is going to be tough, but I do expect the Twins to be right up in the running again for the 3rd straight year. And that all has to start with their skipper and how calm and cool he keeps it on the table.
Yeah, Baldelli, I think he has the same approach as a manager as he did as a player, which was be prepared, do the work it takes to be ready, and then go out and execute. And he wasn't the greatest player you've ever seen, but his career was kind of knocked down by illness and injury a lot. But in a couple of years he's had have been pretty solid. And there's no reason to believe it's going to be any different in Minnesota. My problem with him was he was one of the guys I was considering. My problem with him is he's only got a couple of years in. And to me, a great manager sustains success. He's been great so far. But for me, my number 5 guy, also a Midwest guy, Craig Counsell with the Milwaukee Brewers. That's a team that they don't have the resources that some other teams have, but he's a guy who has that team. They're either in the hunt or in the playoffs pretty much every year that he's out there. I mean, Counsell in 6 years is 434 and 412 with a mid-market kind of team that has to be up and down, because his margin for error with a team like the Brewers and a market like Milwaukee is a lot slimmer than a lot of teams that are out there. That ownership has proven they'll go out and pay some guys to be out there, but it's the depth. He doesn't really get the depth that a lot of other managers have the advantage of having. And Counsell is a guy who really communicates with his players, really understands, where each one of them is day to day, and goes out and has that team ready to play every night. And he's been able to get through having guys that have, he's had starting infielders batting 160 in June, and still been able to make that team good. And make the adjustments and do all that kind of thing that he needs to do. So Craig Counsell, very intelligent guy, very impressive to me as my number 5 manager. Who you got at number 4?
Well, good choice on Counsell, by the way. And I agree with a lot of your comments. He's done a heck of a job with that team. But for number 4, I'm going to go ahead with a guy who's been in the game of baseball a very long time, and that's Dusty Baker. I think Dusty was thrown into quite a situation, coming on just before the season was supposed to start last year and manage a team that was in a whole bunch of cluster mess in the Houston Astros. The cheating scandal, you had players all over the place. Nobody really knew what was going to happen next. And I'm not really basing it on the team performance of the Astros in 2020, although they did have a nice run finishing with a losing record and still getting all the way down to the 9th inning in Game 7 of the ALCS. But the way Baker just came in with a calm and cool leadership, knowing that I've been through this before, I've dealt with teams that are in disarray, I've helped keep things get on track. He doesn't let things get out of hand. He does not let his teams get out of control. And I think that really says a lot about the man he is. Look at some of the runs he's been able to take his teams on in the past. I know much has been made that he's never been able to get over that hump and win a World Series, but you never know. He does still have a solid team in Houston. I wouldn't necessarily put them in the top contenders for this upcoming season, but Baker's just such a well-respected man in the game of baseball. Everybody likes him. He never has anything bad to say about an umpire, another player, or a coach. He just collected. He's a guy you want to have lead your team. And, definitely, I think in my book, first ballot Hall of Famer and Dusty Baker. And yeah, I think the Astros, they lucked out when they saw that he was available last offseason and he came in and kind of took things under control.
Yep, Dusty Baker, best wristbands in the business. I mean,
that too.
Always with the wristbands as a manager. I've never seen too many guys do that, but I was considering him as well. It's just that he's got a bad reputation for burning bullpens. Mm-hmm. His handling of bullpens has been kind of tough. I mean, you can't argue with his success over the years. I mean, the guy's been at it 22 years now as a manager in the big leagues, so it's kind of hard to argue with that. But I didn't go with that at number 4. I went with that at number 4. I went with Don Mattingly. All right, Don Mattingly has been with the Dodgers for 5 years and with the Marlins for 5 years. Okay, with the Dodgers, he had all the resources, big market stuff, and he delivered. Okay, he absolutely delivered with that team and was able to put out some good numbers with the Dodgers, going 446 and 363. All right, made the playoffs several times, was able to, to go out there and do what he was supposed to do with a team like that. Okay, then the axe fell in LA, and he went to the Marlins. This is a young team that's rebuilding, and of course, it seems like they're perpetually rebuilding, right? And he's had to guide a lot. He's had to go through a lot of trades of veteran players out of there, and now having to develop the young players that he had. And that team stepped up and really played well in the shortened season last year. And this is the real test for them this year. Let me see here with the Marlins, his record is just barely under 500 as a career. And he's had some really bad years with the Marlins because they've had such young roster that's developing. So last year they make the expanded playoffs. This year they're expected to make some noise. That starting rotation for the Marlins is going to look really, really tough as they go. I mean, all those young guys going in there, and a guy we know in New Mexico, Trevor Rogers being one of them, big left-hander that's coming out there. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. The problem with them this year is that National League East division is so deep, and we'll talk about this later. The fourth best team in that division could win 88 games the way it's looking. I mean, they're going to be really, really tough. So, but Mattingly, for me, he's a guy that, this year, depending upon how this year goes, he might not be on the list next year. But if this year goes really well, he might be farther up the list too. So, I like Donnie Baseball for sure to be able to go in there. He's had a steady hand with this young team, and he's also proven that he can be successful with veterans.
Yeah, he's done a great job. You look at them losing, I think around 100 games a couple of years ago and able to get things under control, especially during that massive COVID outbreak they had in the first week of last year. I just thought it was really neat how he was able to bring in players from basically all over the country, remake their roster in season, and guys just stepped up and delivered. And who cares if it was a shortened season or not? They made the playoffs. That's the bottom line. That's all anyone's going to care about going forward. But to continue your topic with Don Mattingly, you mentioned all his time in LA. My third manager on this countdown, I'm going ahead with Dave Roberts, the Dodger skipper, the current Dodger skipper, who, obviously just managed them to a World Series title, their first in 32 years. And I know a lot has been made, a lot of criticism has been given to Doc about how he manages a pitching staff. But the bottom line is he delivered. Some of the decisions he made down the stretch ultimately contributed big time to the Dodgers winning that championship. And I'll use Game 5 of the World Series, for example. He did take out Clayton Kershaw after 2 pitches on 2 outs in the 6th inning, and many were really criticizing that at the time because Kershaw was rolling. He had a 4-2 lead, but he brought in Dustin May. May did the job in relief, and Robertson went to Victor Gonzalez to get the 2 biggest outs of that night in Game 5 out of the pen. When first and second one out, he got Randy Arozarena and Brandon Lau to fly out to center. So he trusted the matchups and then brought in Blake Trinan to close the game. And I didn't hear many fans, many naysayers complaining then about what a terrible job Roberts does managing the bullpen. Pretty amazing change from just 24 hours earlier when they were all nagging on him for putting in Pedro Baez and then having Kenley Jansen close the game. I think that win really silenced a lot of the critics. And not just the pitching staff. I mean, Roberts has done a heck of a job managing the position players, the lineup for the last several years. For a long time, it was a platoon. You had guys such as Cody Bellinger, AJ Pollock. They weren't even playing every day. Now, they really settled into their roles here for 2020 that led to the World Championship. But even Chris Taylor and Kike Hernandez. Hernandez now in Boston, of course. He's moved on via free agency. But just knowing where to plug the guys, whether it was second base, center field, left field, I think I just think he did a good job picking the matchups fast. Okay, Kike is going to start here against a left-hander. You're going to plug Taylor in left. And really, anyone on that team can step up. And Roberts, another veteran guy, he's been around the game for a long time. And just really happy for him to see, 5 years of hard work finally pay off. They're finally the world champions in his 5th year of guidance. And, he's not going anywhere. He's got an even more stacked team heading into this year. And I think a lot of the doubters about Dave Roberts are going to be silenced now after he was able to navigate that pitching staff and make the right decisions ultimately in those last 2 games of the series and lead them to glory.
I consider Dave Roberts as well. I mean, you can't argue with the success that he's had with the Dodgers, and he's had his critics, of course, but the fact is, how many World Series have they been through? In the last, like
3 and 4 years.
Yeah, 3 and 4 years. Yeah, and they won last year, and they're the front runners this year. Okay, the thing that I in my consideration for it was he's only ever managed the Dodgers, and he's done that for 5-6 years now, and he's the recipient of one of the best analytics departments that baseball has, and that's combined with more resources than pretty much any other team has as well. So while I can't argue with the guy's success, I want to see what he can do with somebody else and take his wisdom and see how that works when he's got to work around not having, not being 3 or 4 deep at every position that he wants. And we'll see that goes, but definitely been successful, definitely been a good manager so far in his career. So, again, a guy that I'm waiting. I'm going to wait and see on him a little bit. My number 3 guy is probably working in the situation that is the absolute antithesis of what Dave Roberts has, and that's Bob Melvin in Oakland. All right, people forget he's managed 3 different teams. He managed Seattle, he managed Arizona, and now he's been with the A's for a long time. And I think the A's have found their guy because he absolutely gets it. He understands how they do things and the way it's supposed to work. And while he hasn't won any pennants, he hasn't won any World Series or anything like that, that team is always in the hunt. And how they do it, I do not know. I had to write a few stories, about the Oakland A's and their offseason moves and everything before. And their offseason moves, you can never look at them in January and think, okay, well, this is the team that's coming to coming out of camp, because they make so many moves and there's so many guys that you don't even understand are coming to their team, and the way I described it was, they plant the magic beans and they sprinkle the pixie dust and they're successful. Poof, they win 85, 90 games every year. And just the way they play ball. But for that to be able to work, you have to have the right manager. And, Bob Melvin in his career, let me see, I got his numbers down here, 1,260 and 1196. And that's his career record. And with Oakland, he's 767 and 688. Okay, 767 and 688 with one of the lowest payrolls in baseball, a team that is always seemed to be scrapping for any resources they can use. But he takes what they put together and works with the front office, and he knows exactly what they're thinking and how they want to do things, and he applies that perfectly out on the field. So Bob Melvin, to me, is a guy. He's been manager of the year 3 times. You realize that? 3 times that guy's been manager of the year twice in the American League with the A's, and once in the National League when he was with the Arizona Diamondbacks. So that says a lot to me for a guy. He's used to working the small markets, and he's definitely a guy who's proven himself to be every bit of what you thought he was going to be when he became a manager. As a player, he was a catcher, and I remember I was living outside of Baltimore when he was with the Orioles, and I had to tell a guy in the stands one night just what Bob Melvin brought to that team. And that was his head, and that was his presence, and that was his knowledge of the game, and it would be able to handle a pitcher. I told that guy that night, I said, if Bob Melvin hits 250, he's the team's MVP because of what he does for the defense, what he does for the pitching staff, and he does the same thing as a manager. He's always way ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, Melvin does a good job, and a good point there about what he's done in the small markets. He's been in Oakland about near a decade now, and it's always nice to see them right there in the hunt at the end of the year, usually get into the postseason. It was nice to see them get over the hump and win a playoff series for the first time in, I think, 14 years when they got past the White Sox in the first round. I know a little bit of a downer when they basically got out-homered by the Astros in a home run derby there at Dodger Stadium in the neutral site, but it's okay. They got a lot of the same pieces coming back. They're going to have a healthy Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, Chad Pinder, a lot of those guys still in, and I expect them to compete once again. So Melvin.
Okay, and look for him to have the surprise player of the year, I think, in the American League this year. The surprise player of the year is going to be Mark Canha.
I like that.
Outfielder, power-hitting outfielder for them. Mark Canha is 32 years old, okay, and he's in his first walk year ever.
Wow.
So he's probably playing for the only really big contract he'll ever get. And I look for that guy to have an outstanding year. I don't care what he's doing in spring training. Everybody thinks his batting average is down, everything like that. But the Oakland A Magic is going to work for Mark Canha, and he's going to be able to get his walk year. And it's going to be a big one for him. I think he's going to be 30-plus homers.
Hey, batting average and all those numbers really only matter when April 1st comes. And Canha just a hard-nosed guy. He goes out there and does it all for a team and really plays the game hard, and that's who you want.
Yeah. So, all right, number two.
Well, I just mentioned Dave Roberts with the Dodgers, and now we're going to go to their opponent in the World Series. That's right. I have Kevin Cash as my number 2 manager in the game right now. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that are still upset and up in arms about his decision to pull Blake Snell in Game 6 of the World Series. But really, let's face it. Why were the Rays at the point where they got to the World Series? It was because of the analytics. It was because of the pitching decisions he made along the way. They don't get there without it. They don't get there without him making some gutty, tough calls that eventually paid off a lot during the regular season and a lot during the postseason. And I've seen memes and stuff about Cash, even when he's just going to the mound to pull out a pitcher during a spring training game. But let's face it, we've all made mistakes at our job at some point. I know I've made plenty, and Cash just seems to be that more well known because it was on the big stage of the World Series. It didn't work out. They lost the game. They lost the series. But I think people really need to put that past them and realize just what a job he has done with that team. I know we've talked about it before. They were in quite a rebuilding phase where they lost more than 90 games in 2016, and Cash slowly just worked with his farm system and through a series of mini trades that really paid off for that organization in a big way. And he had them right there. This was actually their 3rd straight year in more than 90 games, their 2nd straight in the postseason, and they made it all the way to the World Series. I just really like their approach. You look at their lineups in the playoffs. One time they have Austin Meadows leading off as the DH against a righty, and then the next day a lefty's on the mound, and Mike Brosseau's leading off and playing third. I just love how he can mix and match like the best of them. He has a player for every situation, and he's not afraid to empty his bench or empty his bullpen. That's why he has these players in these spots. And I think most, if not all of them, really buy into the Rays culture and what it is to be a Tampa Bay Ray, because it's very different from a lot of other organizations. And that has to start at the top with a manager who, I know we've mentioned a lot of catchers have made the best managers, and it's easy to forget, but Cash was a catcher during his playing days. I actually didn't realize that until yesterday, but when I looked it up, he played for the Tampa Bay Devil Rays when they were still the Devil Rays back in 2005. He played for a bunch of teams. He knows the game of baseball. I know a lot of baseball purists were saying on Twitter after the Dodgers won that game that they wanted Cash fired, but let's face it, he's not going anywhere, and I wouldn't be surprised, maybe not this year, but in the years to come, if he has Tampa Bay competing for another pennant here down the road.
Yeah, Kevin Cash absolutely has taken, that team to where, I mean, I think to everything that they could be, because let's face it, he takes the broken toys from other teams, that the teams want to discard guys, want to trade them away, they want to release them. I mean, you look at that roster, up and down that roster, and that's what you get, especially for the position players. There's very few position players that came up through the Rays system and are playing there on a regular basis. I think it's Kiermaier and I think it's Kiermaier and Lau are the only two guys that came up through the Rays system that are regulars, playing every day. And to me, Kevin Cash needs to break through and he needs to win the big one. I looked at him and I was juggling he and Craig Counsell, at number 5. And I think Cash is until he gets the big one, I think you're going to have a lot of people look at him as a push button kind of manager, whereas they already have it programmed in how they're going to do things, and they know from pitch to pitch when they're going to make decisions and stuff like that. That's all predetermined. And I think until he gets past that okay, I'm going to use my baseball acumen now and not just the analytics, that part of it. And I think he does that. I think he does that enough, for guys like you and me to recognize. But on a popular basis, everybody has to be able to see that first. And Kevin Cash can't argue with a guy who's at a team. They won 90 games in 2018. They won 96 games in 2019. 40-20 last year. Took the Dodgers to the 6th game of the World Series last year. I mean, I think that he gets everything he can out of that team. But until now, because of that Game 6, I think he's going to have to win the big one to really break through with people.
Yeah, and one more thought on him. I realize the decision to pull Snell has just really been talked about all offseason and just how bad it was for the game. But I think I don't think that was the biggest issue. I just think, and this does not affect my standing as him as a manager at all, but it was just the guy he went to. We talked about Nick Anderson, how he was worn down. He was clearly taxed. So just in that situation, I might have gone to a guy like Peter Fairbanks or a left-hander in Aaron Loup. We mentioned Mookie Betts was much worse against left-handed pitchers than he was against righties. So that was the fact of the matter. It wasn't necessarily pulling Snell. It was more the decision of who to go to that I think most fans don't really look at here deep between the lines.
I would agree with that. Okay. I would totally buy that. I'm in. You got me, but anyway, number 2 for me. Okay. Joe Maddon. Right? And there's a reason for this. Joe Maddon has had success in both leagues. He's been to the World Series with the Rays back when the Rays weren't the Rays. I mean, we're talking 2008. He was taking over one of the worst franchises in baseball and took them to the World Series. And then goes over to the Chicago Cubs, puts together a great culture there, and makes them a perennial playoff team and wins a World Series in 2016. So you got to love that. And, the thing that I like about that is that Joe Maddon cut his teeth, as a major league coach under Mike Scioscia, who was with the Angels. And Mike Scioscia did a lot of innovative things with the players, and Joe Maddon just has taken that to the nth degree with his approach. He has, there's a dress code for Major League Baseball. Well, on some travel days, he has his team wear their pajamas, which I think is amazing. That must be great for them when you travel in something so comfortable rather than try to travel in a suit or dress clothes or anything like that. He has a thing in spring training where every new player to the team has to come in and do like a presentation to the other team. And he gives them the subjects to be able to do that. And I think when he was with the Rays, he had one of the rookies, they had to do a presentation on ostriches. And they have to sit in the clubhouse and actually have visual aids and be able to talk for 15 minutes about this stuff. And you talk about team building, you talk about camaraderie, you talk about the shared experiences that all these players have, and putting that together. And I think that's what really makes it go. Last year for the Angels, I mean, their pitching fell apart. I mean, they were injured, and they were, they had guys that weren't able to get through there. Now they've kind of reloaded. And I look for that team to do really well, and look for them to surprise some people, because Ohtani looks like he's back, and you've got Bundy and you've got Haney, both in walk years, both pitching for the big contract, first big contract they've had in their in their careers. And we'll see. Raisel Iglesias as their closer. That wasn't the name, the marquee guy that everybody was hoping for to close for that bullpen. But you still have a guy you can count on to be that ninth inning guy now, and that places everybody else in that Angel bullpen in their into good roles. And Joe Maddon's done it before, and I look for him to do it again. But to me, he's a very innovative guy. He's walked in and he has had 754 and 705 as his career record. And we're talking, he took over a bad Tampa team. He took over a bad Cubs team and made them into winners. And I think he's going to be able to do the same thing with the Angels.
Joe Maddon's just a guy much like Dusty Baker, who's been around the game. You said he's had success, and he's a veteran. He knows what he's going to keep his players in line. He's going to buy into their culture, but he's also not afraid to let them know that he's the boss if he has to. And I've always liked Joe Maddon, really admired the job he's done. And, fun little quick note on Shohei Ohtani. He batted leadoff in the Angels spring training game today, and he got a hit. And the next he struck out Fernando Tatis Jr. It's just crazy. I know the spring training quirks. The pitcher's not going to.
He batted leadoff and pitched.
Yeah, it's like high school baseball again.
Yeah, you got to love it.
But you're ready for the top spot.
Top spot. I think we may be arriving at the same guy. We'll see.
Well, we could be. We've done this before. We've had the same guess, but I am going ahead with Brian Snitker of the Atlanta Braves. I'm surprised. Okay, go. That's good. I got you. Sometimes it's good to have a little difference. I just think Snitker, the experience that he had starting out in the Braves minor league system when he managed that AAA team in Gwinnett for a few years, he was there for a lot of these guys that are a big part of their team now in the big leagues. And that success translated to the major leagues. When he took over as the Braves skipper, there was still kind of turmoil up there. There was hope for the future, of course, but the major league franchise wasn't exactly coming off a lot of success, and they had just moved out of Turner Field into their new stadium of Truist Park. And things really took off quicker than expected. You had Acuna come up. You had Albies. You had, you signed Ozuna, a bunch of these other free agents, the pitchers such as Fried and Soroka. And they've gotten better each and every year under Snitker's leadership. And I believe he was manager of the year a couple of years ago. And I think he's just a guy that's grinded. He played in the minor leagues. He coached in the minor leagues. He's been there through it all, and he wants his best for the team and that organization, having been basically an Atlanta Brave for life kind of thing. And I'm not kidding when I say in the next 5 years, I do expect the Braves to win a World Series under Brian Snitker's leadership. And they do it with a mix of solid pitching, great hitting. You look at that lineup, that's basically a lot of those spots in that lineup are to be feared, and they have power too. So I know I got you a little bit there. What are your thoughts on Snitker before you move ahead to your number one?
Well, he doesn't surprise me as being part of the conversation here. Surprised me a little bit as number one, but you got to love a guy who did it the old school way, managed through the minors, was able to come up and learned his trade, in the minors, and then comes to the major leagues and with the big club and really does the job. There's so many teams that have gone with guys that didn't have qualifications that were with this was a great player, he's a great clubhouse guy, let's make him a manager. We've seen that in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it's worked, sometimes it hasn't. But Snitker's that old school guy who earned his stripes and has come in and done a great job. He was one of the guys I was considering for the list too. And he could, to be honest with you, I could have had him anywhere from 5 to 3 on my list because he's been able to go in there and do it. I mean, he's done it with one team, and he's been pretty good when it comes down to assimilating new guys and be able to put other kinds of different things in there, as far as his team. And he's had to deal with some adversity too, because he's had some disappointments happen to him, with players and with different things that have gone on. So I like Brian Snitker a lot. He's definitely one of the top managers in baseball. And your argument for him at number one, I can't put you down for that at all. I can't argue too much against it. It's just that I think I kind of went with chalk on number one, and that's Terry Francona. Terry Francona, another guy's been around 20 years, and he's seen 3 different teams that he's been able to manage and go out there. And he did his first stint when he was manager of the Phillies for a couple of years, didn't go so great, and it would have been real easy for him to not be able to get another gig and not be able to go out there. So what does he do? He goes to the Red Sox, and he's the manager that broke the curse. He's the manager that was there when the curse of the Bambino was broke. Two-time World Series champion with the Red Sox, uber success, everything like that. Okay, big market team, big resources, did what he was supposed to do with that team. Leaves them, ends up in Cleveland, and it's hard. And I probably shouldn't even say ends up in Cleveland. He goes to Cleveland, and then he goes to a smaller market team, fewer resources, and has to work some magic. That's where he's really going to be tested as a manager. And what does he do every year? High 80s, low 90s in wins. He goes to the playoffs. He takes these young players. He takes these other players that are bits and pieces from around what they do, and he's able to mold them all into a team that can win and win consistently. And he's managed through some personal issues. He's managed through some health issues of his own. And not just having to deal with the health issues of his team. 2 World Series. He's gone to the World Series with the Indians. To me. And one of the big things about Terry Francona is that you would have to really search within baseball circles, within professional baseball circles, to find somebody that would have something bad to say about Terry Francona. He's that kind of guy.
I can't argue with that. I was much like you with me with Snitker. I was a little surprised, but when you think about it, Francona has done it all in baseball. He's been a winner. He's gone to the World Series with multiple teams and good even keel guy. What more could you ask for in a skipper than Tito?
Well, I think one thing you can do is you can ask any baseball fan and say, okay, what do you think of your manager? Okay, would you replace him with Terry Francona? And a lot of people would have to go, oh, wait a minute now. Ask Yankee fans if they want to replace Boone with Francona. Ask a lot of these other teams. A lot of teams would love to have Terry Francona. So, but then again, the guys you picked are all guys that are on the rise. I went with chalk on a lot of mine. So good list though, man. Good list.
Yeah, you do.
It's the first time we haven't duplicated, I think.
It's fun. It's fun kind of debating back and forth about this stuff. I like it either way.
Yeah, man. Now let's start the real debate now. Yeah. We're looking at our playoff predictions. We're going to see now. Camp's going to break here in a week or so. The teams are going to get ready to go for the start of the regular season. It's time to talk about who's going to the playoffs, who's going to win each league, who's going to win the World Series. All right. I'm going to start off. Let's start off with the National League East because I mentioned this earlier. This team or this division. This whole division is just so loaded. It's amazing to me. All these teams that you've got there that in there. We've talked about the Braves. The Mets have made a lot of the press over the winter, new ownership, and then bringing in. They brought in something like like 7 players in free agency, plus signed a bunch of other guys, and. You're looking at the Washington Nationals, who have a veteran team with some young guys mixed in. That starting rotation, the pitching staff for the Nationals looks really good. And then you got a young team like the Marlins, who are up and comers. You don't know how they're going to react. They could surprise everybody and just roll because so many of the guys on that team don't understand what it's like to feel the pressure or anything like that. And the Phillies look to be the 5th place team, maybe possibly in that division. And the Phillies, you put them in another division, they could win 85 games. I mean, the Phillies aren't a bad team. Looking at them right now, and the problem is the division they're in. So you get a loaded division like that. Who have you got winning that division?
I have. Well, I can't just say 5 minutes ago that this guy's my top manager in baseball and then not pick his team to win the division. So I think it's going to be a close race, but I do have the Atlanta Braves. I think there's just a little too much firepower, and I'll go ahead with the Nationals a close second, followed by the Mets. And I think, they both of those teams with 3 wild cards or 2 wild cards, I should say, in each league now with the expanded format. I could easily see it being Washington and the Mets being the wild cards.
Yeah, all those teams are. The thing is that division, your division winner could win 87 or 88 games simply because those good teams are going to play each other a lot, and they're going to beat up on each other a lot. So just because you have a 100 game winner leading that division doesn't mean those teams aren't good. It's going to be a dogfight of a division. I agree with you. I picked the Braves to win the National League East. I think they've got just too many horses, and I think all the pieces are in the right place. And this is the year they were really looking at to be championship level. I mean, they were good last year for sure, but I just think they're a year better. They're a year more experienced, and they're a year more settled. And I think the Braves are going to be just too tough to beat when it comes down to it. I agree. Washington and the Mets are going to be right in there. I think the Marlins are going to be a lot better than people think. And I think the Phillies, are just going to be, get beat up on, because every time they play a division game, they're going to be playing somebody that's probably ahead of them in the standings, even though they're not that bad a team. So I like them a lot. National League Central, I'll start. I think it's kind of hard to pick against this team right now, even though they've still got a few injuries, but they got some guys coming back. I'm picking the Cardinals, and with Nolan Arenado coming over there, he and Goldschmidt hitting 3-4 every night, regardless of who hits 3 and who hits 4. That's a scary prospect. All you got to do is take 2 guys that have any kind of on-base percentage at all, decent, and put them in front of those 2 guys, and they're both going to drive in 100 runs. It's going to be scary when it comes down to it. The key with the Cardinals is going to be their pitching, how healthy they can be. They don't have Dakota Hudson this year, who is a nice innings horse for them. They're going to have some other guys come through. Miles Michaelis is going to have to, pitch through some difficulties that he's had. If Michaelis is healthy, they've got a really good chance to run away with that division, because there's not a lot of competition there.
Yeah, I think we keep this Central simple, because I have the Cardinals also. I think the Brewers could pose a bit of a threat, as well as the Cubs, but when you had that firepower, Goldschmidt and Arenado in the middle of the order, that's really the extra bat they need. They've scuffled offensively the last several seasons, but I think that'll help put them over the top, and they'll recapture the Central crown. So now on we go to the West.
Look at Tommy Edman to have a big year for them. He's going to be playing every day.
I like Edman.
Yeah, he's going to be playing one position every day, and probably going to be their leadoff hitter. So I think he's going to be a big surprise for
really
everybody.
Good player.
West, National League West. Who you got?
Well, I think this would be easy for a lot of people, and I will take the easy way. I'll go with the defending champion, the Dodgers, to win the West. I think they're just too stacked at every position. You look at pitching, the depth is even more than last year when you got Bauer and Price added to the list. But I do need to revise my prediction a little bit for the other division. I said the Nationals would be a wild card team. I need to take them off, because I do think the San Diego Padres will get there. We've talked about the Padres several times in their offseason additions, Blake Snell and Yu Darvish, among others. They're just going to be a stacked team. It's going to be fun, those battles between the Padres and Dodgers. But I have the Dodgers winning it for what would be the 9th year in a row, and then the Padres get that wild card for a 2nd straight year.
I am rubber stamping what you had to say on that. Until somebody proves that they're better than the Dodgers, I think the Dodgers are the winners, and the Padres are going to give them a good run. I think it's going to be a great divisional race throughout the year, and you might even see the Padres up on top of that division, for stretches of this year, because they're that good. But I think overall the Dodgers are just too deep. They're just too talented, and they've got all the experience in the world that you'd ever want. It's going to be tough to beat them. And again, the Padres are my other my top wild card team. So we both agree on that. Second wild card team, I'm picking the Washington Nationals as my second wild card team to be in there this year. How about you?
I have the Padres number 1, and I'll pick the Mets at number 2, my second wild card team.
Yeah, and can't argue with it. I mean, the Mets are that good. I mean, they've added that much talent, and I think there'll be a real challenge for them this year in that division. Just getting out of that division is going to be a dogfight, and I think you're going to have at least 2 teams out of that division in the playoffs. And after the top team, the Braves, it could be any one of the next 3. I mean, who knows? So,
yeah, it's really a toss-up.
Good pick on that one. Let's go to American League East. You want to start, or you want me to?
I'll start.
Go.
I'll go ahead, and I'm going to go with quite a surprise here. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying the Yankees are going to win 100 games, but injuries seem to catch up to them every single year, no matter who it is. They always get tough breaks. So I'm going to go ahead with a real surprise and say the Toronto Blue Jays are going to be atop that division this year. You look at the additions. You look at Marcus Semien. You look at George Springer. Then they've remained rock solid on the pitching side as well. I think the Blue Jays are going to turn out to be really tough to beat. Plus, they're going to be rejuvenated, getting to play in their home ballpark after having to play in Buffalo last year due to the COVID restrictions in Canada. So I think the Blue Jays are going to surprise people in that division by 3 or 4 games, and the Yankees will still be the Yankees. They'll still be in there, and they're going to end up being the wild card team.
Okay, well, I have the Toronto Blue Jays and the Tampa Bay Rays fighting tooth and nail for the division title. And again, until you can prove to me that the Tampa Bay Rays aren't the best team in that division, which they have been over the last 3 years, they're my champion. They're my American League East champion. I'm picking the Tampa Bay Rays to win thinly over the Toronto Blue Jays. We're talking maybe like a game or two that they're better than the Blue Jays. And the reason being is they've got a lot of guys that are experienced now. They've gone through the playoffs, and been through some really tough, playing in a really tough division. And I think the inexperience of the Blue Jays is gonna cost them a little bit. They have added some veterans. They have been able to do good things. But I picked Tampa over Toronto in that one. And Toronto is going to be my number one wild card team, because I think you could have these two teams be able to go up there and they may win 97 or 96 games a piece coming into this year or at the end of this year, and it looks pretty good. But I'll take the Rays until somebody shows me they're better than the Rays. I'm picking the Rays because that approach has been able to work over and over again. American League Central, I'm going to start. I love the White Sox. I love the White Sox in that division. There's a couple of teams that are out there. I'm never counting Cleveland out. They always seem to be able to be in there and be competitive and make the right moves. Kansas City, if you take a look at that Kansas City roster and look at them, they may not have the overall depth that a lot of other teams do, but they have some horses in Kansas City, and they could challenge as well. They're going to be pretty tough. So, but right now I'm looking at, of course, Minnesota is going to be in there. It's going to be another tough division, but I'm looking at the White Sox with all their improvements. And I think Lucas Giolito is the guy that's going to lead that team. He's more than proved it. I was skeptical of him up until last year. And even with all the adversity and everything, he pitched great. I love that guy now. The White Sox, to me, are the best team in the American League Central.
Yeah, well, I kind of teased it when I said the Twins were going to be in a dogfight if they wanted to win their third straight title, and that's because I'm going with your pick. I like the Chicago White Sox as well. That team had it all going last year. I know they kind of collapsed down the stretch in that last week, and they only ended up being a wild card team, but I think the tides have turned with their offseason additions. They're going to rise to the top with Mr. Lucas Giolito leading the way.
Yeah. American League West, who you got?
Now, this is an interesting division because you have a lot of teams that are probably going to be beating up on each other. But I do think when all is said and done, the Houston Astros are just going to squeak by. It's not going to be anything special, maybe like 87-75, 88-74. But I think the Astros are going to do just enough to win that division, just enough offense, some strong pitching here and there, with maybe Verlander, of course, too, coming back late in the season. That could be a big lift coming in the postseason. And once again, I'll go with the Oakland A's as a wild card team.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got the reverse. I've got Oakland winning the division, and the reason being is I think Houston, their pitching their pitching house is not going to be right to start the year, and it may not be right until second week of May. The way it's looking now, they may not be able to get a regular rotation with the guys that they want, and they may not be able to hit their stride. And I think they're going to struggle a little bit early, and that's going to cost them when it comes to the division race down the stretch. Oakland, to me, they're just doing exactly what they do every year, and they're walking out and you look at the roster and you go, who are these guys? And every year they go out and they win 85, 90 plus games, and I think they're going to be good enough to win that division this year and to be able to move into the playoffs. But I do have Houston as one of my wild cards, along with the Blue Jays. All right, who wins the American League for you?
Who wins the American League? I did mention that the Blue Jays won the division, but I think the Yankees will surprise a lot of people and finally get back to the World Series. First time in 12 years. People have been predicting it for a while, so Yankees atop the AL.
I think that team, there's certainly a lot of talent on there, but it's injury prone and it's older guys. And the injury bug has bitten them the last couple of years, and I don't see any different coming in this year because a lot of the same guys are there. So I don't see the Yankees winning. I'm going with the White Sox to win the American League. I really am. I think they've got enough horses for the long haul, and I think they're going to be able to get out there and get out of the American League because the teams that they're up against are either going to be older and snake bitten, or they're going to be kind of younger and inexperienced. And I think the White Sox have a great mix of veterans and young guys to be able to go there. National League. Who's going to the World Series in National League?
Dodgers. And what more do we have to say than Dodgers? We've covered them all already.
Yeah, the Dodgers are going. I don't think, for all is said and done in the National League, it's the Dodgers' house, and somebody's got to take it from them. World Series, I got the Dodgers over the White Sox, 4-2.
World Series, I'll say Dodgers over the Yankees in 5 games, and LA becomes the first repeat champion in about 2 decades.
All right, so there we are. There's our predictions, and that's another Hardball Life edition this week. For Joe Traub, I'm Rich Daniels. And, oh, by the way, congratulations to Salvador Perez. Signed a 4-year, $80 million contract for a catcher that's 30. You got to love that guy. Oh, man. As an old catcher myself, I'm envious. I love the guy. But that's going to do it for us this week. Joe will be back next week with another edition of Hardball Life. Thanks for joining me tonight, and thanks for everybody for tuning in.
We'll see you next week, as we'll be next week at this time. We'll be about 4 days away from opening day. Can't wait. It's going to be a blast.
All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. 365, we making a plays. You talking the game, get you through the days. We're high in the court, the dime in the lane. Variety, topics never the same. All presentation, sports information. In the airways, taking the nation. All sport, all plays. Like working your faces. Grace up the field, so type the laces. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays. Network. We on top of our game. All sports, all plays. All sports, all plays.